Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Davis. This is Jim Morose, and this is A Republic Always. Season 1, Episode 6. So we're on Episode 6. So, again, we're taping this show on September 12th, 2025, which is actually 2 days after Charlie Kirk was assassinated on a college campus in Utah. So, just wanted to point that out. But it's just a sad day for our free speech. It's tough. It's tough. Life is tough. But at any rate, I'm going to just kind of recap what we've gone over before. Now, again, I know these are PragerU University videotapes, 5-minute, quick, high-level synopsises of the Constitution and the Articles. So basically what we did was we've gone over why we need a republic and not a confederacy. That was number one. Number two was who wrote the Constitution in Philadelphia and why they wrote it. And number three was the limited powers of Congress. And number four was the limited powers of the executive branch. And today, we're going to be talking about the Supreme Courts, the do's and don'ts, and what they should and shouldn't do, can and can't do. It's a little touchy there. And then we're going to also go over the real reason for the Bill of Rights, okay? The real reason, and what the Bill of Rights really means. So, at any rate, that's what we're going to talk about. And again, you've got to remember that the Constitution was written by citizens to let other people control them, as it's written in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution itself. There's a whole, orchestrated moral code, moral and ownership, and who's in charge and whatever. So we didn't give up our rights; we assigned them, and we're supposed to have a citizen-run government, but we've run off the track. We train with that, off the tracks. We're off the tracks because all these politicians that lead us are career politicians, and they've been in there for decades. They're not citizens anymore. They're the elite. They're the elite of the elite, and we need to, and that's why we the people, we have a republic. We're not a democracy, okay? And that's Benjamin Franklin was leaving the Constitutional Convention, which we talked about, and it was in our study. We'll just have to go over it again. Someone said, "Hey, Ben, what kind of government did you give us?" And Ben said, "It's a republic if you can keep it." Now, if you don't know what it is, then how can you keep it? Because it is not a democracy. So we have to understand how this government is supposed to work. We've been lied to, and when people tell you that we live in a democracy and this pure democracy, no, they're wrong. And as you'll see in the Bill of Rights, like the first one, Congress shall make no law, okay, about peacefully assembling. And when you look at some of these, they call them protests. They're not peaceful assemblies. They're looting, burning. It's criminal. What they're doing is criminal. That's not a protest. That's not airing grievances. That's a riot. Those are riots. They call a protest. They call a riot a protest. And they've been lying to us. And who is they? Well, you have to figure out who you're listening to, because it's getting worse. It is getting worse. So we're going to start with the judicial. Okay, so we're going to try to hit that at minute 8. But the judicial is, let's put a picture one, okay? This is, the job of the judicial is to settle disputes about the rights of the parties before them, not to use cases as a platform to resolve policy debates. So this is a shot out of what the video will be on. So, the judges are supposed to settle disputes, and you can take that down. And so basically, to settle disputes, we need to understand how is the law. We used to run on what we call Blackstone's commentaries on the law. We used to use Blackstone's law as the commentaries as how we should run our legal system. But we've gone away from that, and now we're into case precedents. And again, these professors, all these videos are done by professors from highly accredited colleges, and this is their area of expertise, which scares me because they're not talking about Blackstone, and they're not talking about case precedent, but I mean, they're talking about how the Constitution should want them to work, and so the colleges over the years and everything else is just perverted and dumbed down and watered down the whole concept of the republic, and that's why we're in trouble now, because we've got too many professionals in government where we should have citizens, and we have that deep state, which we talked about when we talked about the Congress, how the Congress is really they're creating bills, and then they only have 10,000 2,000 words in the bill, and then by the time it gets through the bureaucrats and the deep state, there's 25,000 pages worth of promulgated rules and regulations, which were not voted on by Congress. So everybody's interpreting these things, and it's not really happening. So that's what we're doing. And let's just put up picture number 2 real quick. And so just to set the stage, this is just a clip from what we're going to see in the video, is that we got 3 branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And so, the founding fathers thought that the executive, they're the ones that have all the power, because they enforce the laws that Congress implements. So Congress implements the laws, and they control the purse, and the executive branch enforces the law. The judicial, all they're supposed to do is just people bring disputes to them, and they're supposed to settle them. And so so the founding fathers said the judicial really has no power, but that's because the legislative, they've delegated their power about constitutionality. You'll see that some of the presidents did some good work on getting rid of unconstitutional laws and things, but the judicial branch should not have as much power as it does. So let's cue up the tape, and then the first video. And what we're going to do is see, there's a nice 5-minute video on going on what the judicial branch and how it's written in the Constitution and what we need to do, and we'll just focus on that. So,
of the 3 branches of government, the legislative, the House of Representatives and the Senate, the executive, the president, and the judicial, the Supreme Court and the lower federal courts, which is the most powerful? Today, most people would probably say the judicial. It's the Supreme Court that has the final say over every controversial issue. Prayer in school, abortion, same-sex marriage, let the court decide is the modern refrain. But that's a long way from how the framers saw the role of the courts. Let's look at what the Constitution says. Article 3, Section 1 vests the nation's judicial power in a Supreme Court and any lower courts that Congress may establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished. By good behavior, the framers meant lifetime tenure. As long as federal judges didn't do anything worthy of impeachment, they had the job for life, or until they chose to give it up. The purpose of lifetime tenure and salary was to place federal judges above politics, to make them independent of the legislative and executive branches. In this way, they would act as another check on the power of those 2 branches. Yet for all that, Alexander Hamilton thought the judiciary was beyond comparison the weakest of the 3 branches. Boy, was he wrong. But not in his assessment of the judicial branch as spelled out in the Constitution. As Hamilton explained, the executive bears the sword, or the power to coerce. Congress sets the rules and controls the purse, the federal budget. But what weapon did the judiciary have? Hamilton couldn't see it. He couldn't see any because he and the other framers never imagined that the court would be the ultimate arbiter of what was constitutional and what wasn't. They saw the court as having a much more limited function, as we shall see. The Constitution doesn't even state how many justices there should be. That was set by the First Congress of 1789. They set the number of justices at 6, which, to our modern sensibility, is bizarre. What would happen in the case of a tie vote? Again, this points to the framers' modest conception of the court. As spelled out in Section 2 of Article 3, federal courts have just one job: to settle disputes about the rights of the parties before them, not to use cases as platforms to resolve policy debates. For the framers, setting policy was the job of the people's elected representatives. What about the ability to declare laws unconstitutional? Didn't that belong to the courts? Yes, but that didn't make the courts the only authority on the Constitution. As understood by the framers, the legislative and executive branches have their own duty and power to interpret the Constitution when doing their jobs. For example, presidents have vetoed bills they considered unconstitutional. That's what Andrew Jackson did when he refused to recharter the National Bank in 1832. He didn't think the Constitution gave Congress the authority to establish such an institution. True, the President and Congress have usually followed the court's readings of the Constitution as a way of avoiding unnecessary conflict. But there have been exceptions. Most famously, Abraham Lincoln rejected the Supreme Court's holding in Dred Scott v. Sanford that the Constitution made African descendants of slaves ineligible for U.S. citizenship. As president, Lincoln respected the court's decision about what should happen to Scott, a party to the case. But otherwise, in running the executive branch, Lincoln followed his own view that persons of African descent could be citizens under the Constitution. For example, he gave them U.S. passports. Today, by contrast, many think the judiciary is exclusive and superior in its power to interpret the Constitution. No wonder it seems like the most powerful branch. The framers, who had so carefully constrained the power of the courts in Article 3, would have been surprised and dismayed. I'm Sharif Girgis, Associate Professor of Law at the University of Notre Dame for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video.
Welcome back.
To keep Prager...
Again, I can't, stress this enough that, we got to step back and really try to understand the basics of our government and our Constitution and how things have changed over the years, and we need to rein in the government. The government should not be. So I'm not a professor, but I play one on this show. Okay. I remember reading somewhere, and I don't know where, it could be in Blackstone's Commentaries of the Law, but the government can't be the victim. In other words, the government can come and charge you. When it comes up and it says that they're supposed to settle disputes, it's disputes between citizens, not between the government and the citizen. The government can't. I mean, unless there's got to be, like he said, there has to be a victim. Where is the victim? What is the crime? And it's just so perverted. We've perverted the definitions and the precedents. Like I said, we're under precedents now. So not every situation is the same. Everything is different. One little thing will change it. Like when you watch the when you watch the weather people guessing, where the hurricane's going to hit and what the trajectory is going to be. They have those spaghetti, strings that they show you, and they go, well, if one projection says this way, one projection says that way, and there's like 11 of them, depending on what. But there's 2,499 different criterias to tweak within that projection, so when you make those models, you got to put in, and you make one change on one variable, but what if, when there's 2,000 different variables, how you can't control that? And so we follow this fake science of models And we've got to get back to the basics. Like I said, Benjamin Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it, and we need to know how this is supposed to work. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Thomas Jefferson said the biggest threat to our form of government is an uninformed voters, uninformed voters electorate. So he said, and Thomas Jefferson said that the remedy for that is education. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to educate and show you the way it's supposed to work and not what's really happening. I mean, like in the video we just saw, some of the judicial guys, they did, the presidents, Jackson and Abraham Lincoln, they said, no, that's not constitutional. It was Jackson with the banks and Abraham Lincoln with the slaves, the Dred Scott thing. So it's Congress and the executive branch are the arbiter of what's constitutional. What's the other one? The judiciary is only supposed to be looking at disputes between the citizens. Okay, but we need to, I've got a book here called The Myth of Separation of Church and State. It goes through a lot of things just about how crazy the misinterpretations of the law goes, but we are where we are. So now we're going to kind of slide in. We'll let the judiciary stand where it is. There's a lot of things that are going on that, like I say, some of these decisions I hear that a federal judge from this district said Trump can't do this, and from district number 3, Trump can't do that. District number 5, he can't do that. They're all the same people doing the same things, and it's like, well, who brought these charges? They don't tell you. There's a thing called standing. I've filed a couple of lawsuits and things or appeals and things. They said, oh, sorry, Sonny, you don't have standing. So, oh, that's it. I may be right as can be, and you may be right as can be, but if the judge says, sorry, you don't have any standing, then you can't. And that's what they did with all the all the fake, election fraud things and everything else. So. All right, I guess we're going to have to queue up. Let's queue up the next video, and we're going to go into the Bill of Rights and the real reason for the Bill of Rights. And the real reason for the Bill of Rights is because nobody was going to sign that Constitution unless they made specific demands. And the demand, which I always think is funny, is that the First Amendment says Congress shall make no laws affecting these things, and then it says the Second Amendment says Congress shall not infringe on the rights to bear arms. And, it's the thing saying, Congress, you don't have all the power in the world. Let her rip whenever you got it.
If you ask people to describe what is in the U.S. Constitution, most would begin by citing freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and maybe the right to bear arms. But in fact, these are not part of the Constitution that came out of Philadelphia in September 1787. They are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They are part of what is known as the Bill of Rights. And why was this Bill of Rights necessary? The answer is that many Americans thought the Constitution, a document dedicated to limiting federal power, didn't limit that power enough. This was not a fringe opinion. People like Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, Patrick Henry, and George Mason all shared this fear. James Madison, one of the principal authors of the Constitution, disagreed. He argued that all the assurances the doubters wanted were already in the Constitution. They just needed to look a little more closely. But Madison, ever the pragmatist, came around, especially when it became clear that without those assurances, the Constitution would not be ratified. So Madison took it upon himself to draft the 10 amendments. The First Amendment is the most famous. It clearly sets out some of our most fundamental rights, the rights for which America has been universally admired. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. The Second Amendment protects the right of the people to possess firearms. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Third Amendment is the most obscure, but made perfect sense to a citizenry that had, within recent memory, fought off the British Army. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. The Fourth Amendment prohibits the government from arresting you or searching your belongings without some reason to think that a crime has occurred. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause. The Fifth Amendment guarantees you a fair legal process before you're deprived of your freedom or property, and protects you from being put on trial for the same crime twice. It also protects you from having to testify against yourself in court. This is the source of the phrase, plead the fifth. And if the government takes your property to put it to public use, for example, to build a highway, you must be paid a fair price for it. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. The Sixth Amendment gives those charged with a crime the right to have a speedy trial with a lawyer by their side and to confront their accusers. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. The Seventh Amendment gives you the right to trial by jury in civil cases. In suits at common law, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. The Eighth Amendment protects you from unduly high bail and fines and antiquated forms of punishment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. The Ninth Amendment makes it clear that if a right is not mentioned in the Constitution, it doesn't mean that right doesn't exist. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny others retained by the people. The 10th Amendment is, in effect, an insurance clause. It makes clear that any powers not reserved to the federal government belong to the states or the citizens. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. These are the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They have long been and remain an elegant testament to our understanding of freedom, the placing of strict limits on the power of government to interfere in our lives. It's hard to imagine America without them. I'm Sharif Girgis, Associate Professor of Law at the University of Notre Dame for Prager University.
Okay, welcome back. Again, just back to the basics. It's very, very, very simple. Our country was founded as it was an experiment of a new government, never tried before. We've always had kings, monarchs, and dictators, and you name it. No, this is supposed to be a citizen-run government. So the Founding Fathers knew that, you know, the states and the citizens wouldn't accept the Constitution unless they put in these Bill of Rights. I mean, and again, they had the, back in those days, Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, and, we've lost a lot of common sense around here, folks. And then the boys wrote, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay wrote the Federalist Papers to clearly, define and understand what the Constitution is and what it's supposed to be. And people still had issues. And so the issues were resolved when Madison said, okay, we're going to have to come out with these Bill of Rights. And again, it's very clear in the First and Second Amendments where it says, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. It's like, people, Congress doesn't have all this power, so we gotta, Congress, they're doing a lot of things that are unconstitutional. And again, and the Second Amendment ends up with saying all these rights for the people shall not be infringed. Okay, so and then it goes on to all the other, articles or the 10 amendments, the first 10 amendments, otherwise known as the Bill of Rights, just clearly define what the government cannot touch. Do not make any laws, do not infringe. The people are free to do these things, and they have all these protections. And Congress, in their wisdom and stupidity, I mean, the Bible does say, that the wisdom of the world is foolish in the eyes of God. And I mean, as my father used to say, things like, these people are so smart, they're stupid, okay? Our laws are just, they're not created, I don't know all the way, it's legislative malpractice. We should be voting on the issues for the issues, one issue at a time. That's what's supposed to be happening, but we're not doing that. They have these omnibus bills, and they put all this crap in there, and then they vote on it, saying, it's the law now. I mean, they say it's the law, like back in history, the famous phrase of, it's just following orders, it's the law. Well, some of these laws are clear in violation of the Constitution. Specifically, things like, in the Constitution, it clearly says, and we've heard this before when we went through the Constitution, you can't have an ex post facto law. In other words, you can't pass a law that makes something illegal, but has been illegal for time immemorial, like a gun. Like, you own a gun, and all of a sudden they make these laws, you can't have this one or that one or this one or that one or this one. And you got to surrender them and turn. No, you can't. You cannot do that. But they make it sound like they can, and they do it. But they shouldn't. It's just one thing after another. Those are just the big point. We can't go over the whole thing in a half an hour. But we're almost at the end of our show anyway. So look we've gone over these things, and I really need you guys to go out and find for yourself. Go find some constitutional basics. Get reading up on what we should and shouldn't be doing. And again, you got to even just ask yourself the basic question: where do our rights come from? We're talking about the Bill of Rights. Where do our rights come from? See, the Declaration of Independence was the foundation for the Constitution. It's an intertwined document. And so within the Declaration of Independence, I'll just read it verbatim. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So that's what the Constitution is. That's what the citizens, we the people should be doing, is keeping our government accountable, and we are not. They're running roughshod over us, and we should be running roughshod over them. And we've got everything backwards. It's very, very convoluted where we are now. And I don't even know where to begin, but I can't because the show's over. So next month, we're going to go over, we're a nation of states. Okay, we're not just a nation. There's 50 states. Some people thought there were 57. And then we're going to go over the Civil Rights Amendments. So those are the two big ones. I mean, they probably need their own shows, but you know what? There's only so much one guy can do. We're going to just do this, and hopefully next time I'll have a little cryon here. We'll have a little website pointer where you can go and find all these shows up to date so you can catch up if you're just seeing this for the first time or whatever. But, these are tough times. Like I said, this is September 12th, 2025, and 2 days after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And may God have mercy on our souls and on our country. And may we all learn to respect and love each other and our country. God bless you. See you next month. Thanks.